Wasabi guys, welcome back to another how to build around this commander video. This time we get to look at Minsc and Boo Timeless Heroes. This is from the Commander Legends Baldur's Gate set. To be honest, I had no idea this set was even going to come out, which apparently it's set to release in June. I like it. I think it was a great idea to return back to the D&D crossover. We had a lot of specific strategies, especially if you're talking about venturing into the dungeon. Hopefully we get to do that again. I really like that. But Minsc and Boo Timeless Heroes, this 4-mana red and green legendary Planeswalker, can be your commander. Now, unlike with Minsc, Beloved Ranger, you won't be able to play white. That's okay. I think if you had access to white with this Planeswalker, it would make it so much better, but it could also make it pretty busted too. This is a fling commander in the spirit of Brian Stoutarm, which if you've been following my channel for some time, you know that is one of my favorite underrated commanders. All you're doing is flinging creatures, having a good time. It's so unlike any other strategy. I know it's going to be mostly combat related, so there's no surprise to how you're going to build it, but we are going to be focusing on making creatures as big as they can be and also manipulating damage. Before we get into the video though, if you have not already, please do subscribe to the channel. 33,000 and counting, thank you all so much. Going over the abilities, when Minsc and Boo enters, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you may create Boo, a legendary 1/1 red hamster creature token with trample and haste. What's really nice about this, what's really considerate of Wizards of the Coast, is that they're not making a different Boo creature token. So if you already have the one from the previous set in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, you won't have to find a different Boo token, you could just use that one. Although I'm certain that you're going to get a newer one in this set anyway. The +1 says put 3 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target creature with trample or haste. I like that a lot. I mean, that's a lot of power and toughness you're adding to a creature that you're probably going to sacrifice to deal some damage to your opponent's face anyway. That restriction of only being able to do that for trample or haste creatures is kind of annoying, but then again, we do have a lot of creatures that are capable of getting +1/+1 counters at a much faster rate than just 3 a turn. The -2 is sacrifice a creature. When you do, Minsc and Boo Timeless Heroes deals X damage to any target, where X is that creature's power. If the sacrificed creature was a hamster, you draw X cards. That is insane. It's not just a fling, as you read there, you also get to draw some cards, and because you get your hamster back, I think it has a little bit of an advantage over something like Brian Stoutarm in the past, where the fling commander strategy is held back with an inability to recover well mid to late game. Always getting that hamster if you have your commander out there. You sacrificed Boo your previous turn, well, you get another Boo for your following one. That's really cool, and you can follow that up by putting another 3 +1/+1 counters on it. Great design. I think this is going to be a fun commander. So let's go over some of the ways that you can build around this commander option. First up, I would like to mention a relatively newer strategy, although it's kind of just a new word for what already existed. We've had counters, we've had auras and equipments, but that's all been lumped together with the wording of modified. I personally wouldn't recommend leaning into modified too much. Not that there's a lot to lean into, it's just I don't think there are too many ways of benefiting off of modified that are going to synergize with getting a lot of +1/+1 counters, making our creatures bigger, or manipulating damage. We do have some options that I think might be beneficial for us, such as Invigorating Hot Springs. Making it so that any of our creatures that have +1/+1 counters on them have haste is actually quite beneficial if we are worried about not getting those 3 +1/+1 counters on those specific creatures. Thundering Raiju might be the best modified related card that you can throw into this deck, because it is all about dealing extra damage. When it attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, then Thundering Raiju deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of modified creatures you control other than Thundering Raiju. So that could be the hamster that you have, that could be any other creature with +1/+1 counters or equipped or anything like that. It's going to deal that much damage to each of your opponents. That's pretty cool. And Shishiro isn't going to synergize that well. This is kind of why I said don't lean into it too much, but it wouldn't be the worst addition. We are going to be benefiting from equipment, so it's going to have some synergy, and putting a +1/+1 counter on each of our modified creatures at the end step is also nice. Now, speaking of equipments, we actually have some really sweet options. It's easy to overlook equipments in a deck like this because it's going to be mostly creature focused, and you're going to see a lot of ways of making creatures bigger with +1/+1 counters, but don't overlook something like Colossus Hammer. It has a massive equip cost, I know, but that is a ton of power and toughness that you're going to be able to fling at an opponent, and it stays out there for you to equip it to another creature later on. Blackblade Reforged is also great, a little bit more flexible when it comes to the cost to equip. but just as beneficial. And Fractal Harness, I think, has potential to be an all-star with this deck, because whenever the equipped creature attacks, you double the number of +1/+1 counters on it. So you just keep making those creatures bigger and bigger. Again, going back to something like Brian Stoutarm, a big weakness is that you weren't playing something like green, where you can easily manipulate power and toughness. So you'll see with the addition of green, you have a lot of cards like Fractal Harness that just make things like this easier. And I wouldn't recommend playing Lightning Greaves just because our commander is focused on being able to target, add more +1/+1 counters. Wouldn't be the worst thing, but if you absolutely care about being able to put those 3 +1/+1 counters on any creature, I would opt for Swiftfoot Boots over Lightning Greaves. And Kuldra Complete is an interesting card because it can be a great creature on its own. You equip it to any of your other creatures, it gives them haste and trample, so they become candidates for those 3 +1/+1 counters, and +5/+5 isn't too shabby. But if we are talking about the best ways of making your creatures bigger with this type of commander, look no further than your Doubling Season cards, the Doubling Season family. Branching Evolution, doubling the counters on creatures, Doubling Season, pretty much doubling everything. And Vorinclex Monstrous Raider, going to be an absolute all-star. Depending on your budget, you're probably gonna cut maybe some of these. You maybe won't have room to play all of them, but if you aren't worried about budget, then you should probably consider playing all 3 of these. If you have 2 of them out there at the same time, you would probably have to go out of your way to lose, because you would be getting double the counters, double the counters, and you could easily just start flinging players out of the game. What I really like, and this is kind of old school commander, because these creatures here that you see, Managorger Hydra, Tarian Mauler, Hamlet Bat Goliath, any creature that just makes itself bigger isn't always the best thing, but in this case it is, and I think it's hilarious. I think it's one of the funniest things you can do in a commander game is make a creature massive, and it's like a ticking time bomb. Your opponents can see it coming from a mile away, and if you're building around this commander, you obviously have other ways of flinging them, so they know it's only a matter of time until they're dealt that damage. It's pretty hilarious. Hamlet Bat Goliath especially. A lot of people would look at it like it's a waste of 7 mana, but in only like a couple turns, that's going to knock out a player for sure. We have even more creatures like this, Forgotten Ancient, also with the benefit of just dumping all those counters onto another creature, so we could put it on our Boo if we want to draw some cards. Colonian Hydra can be obnoxious with the deck. Really any of the Hydras, because the Hydras usually deal with getting a lot of +1/+1 counters. And Malignus is pretty cool because the damage from it can't be prevented. And in many cases, it's going to be a 20/20. It's going to be something substantial for 5 mana. And as I alluded to before, we do have ways of actually flinging outside of our commander, and this is something that's going to be very important, since our primary way of flinging creatures is sorcery speed. So you want to play Fling, you want to play anything that's like Fling. If they make a new Fling for this set, I would recommend playing it as well. They do pretty much the same thing with the exception of the condition where you get to draw cards for the hamster. Still important though. Thought is the same thing, it's just 1 mana for sorcery speed, and Grab the Reins is one of my favorite instant speed red cards, because it does essentially the same thing as Fling. If you decide to entwine it, you also get to gain control of an opponent's creature, give it haste, deal a lot of damage to your opponents by stealing their creature and sacrificing it. That's awesome. And finally, what I think is also going to be pretty beneficial, it may not be enough at times to sacrifice a creature with a lot of counters on it. So if you have a deck with a lot of haste and trample creatures, play something like Jessica Thrice Reborn. So you won't even have to rely on flinging your creature, just deal combat damage with a trample creature that has a lot of power. And that's going to be tripled with her 0. Dictate of the Twin Gods is also nice. I recommend playing anything that's not creature specific, because this will double the damage dealt by our Planeswalker. Our Planeswalker's dealing the damage. It's a bit risky, of course, because it also doubles the damage that you take, or it doubles the damage that our Planeswalker takes, any of our creatures take. Fiery Emancipation, like Jessica triple damage, is pretty awesome. And if you have that out there, it's kind of like with the Doubling Season family. You actively have to go out of your way to mess that up at that point. So anyway, let me know what you think about Minsc and Boo Timeless Heroes. Really cool Planeswalker commander option. I know we've got a lot of these now. If there's a way to make Planeswalkers more interesting, it's to make them commander options. I've been saying this for a long time. I just don't think they're going to be as useful as they used to be, where you would just treat them like good utility cards to throw into whatever deck you wanted to if it were the right colors. Now you just have a commander option like this, you build around it. Planeswalkers are supposed to stand out. I think this does. I think you have a nice little fling-specific strategy. It's going to be a headache for some people. It's going to be really fun to deal a lot of damage with this. So, Commander Void here signing off. I will see you all next time.